Thanks everyone for joining us today. Again, please feel free to drop your questions and your thoughts into the question and chat box throughout today's Q&A session. We'll be starting off today by going through some of the basics about the Manhattan College TEFL certification program and TEFL in general, and then circling back to the Q&A session at the end, but please continue to drop those throughout today's presentation. First and foremost, I just want to thank our panelist, Jeff, for joining us from Manhattan College. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
He's going to be helping answer all of your questions about the TEFL Practicum, as well as Manhattan College TEFL certification program alongside myself. My name is Elspeth, and I'm one of the TEFL course advisors here at TCHOI, who has the privilege of working with students on this program. So again, thanks for joining us. And just to go through today's agenda in a little bit more detail, we'll first start off talking about just the basics about TEFL, TEFL 101. We'll go through some of the most frequently asked questions related to TEFL before we dive into the specifics about the Manhattan College TEFL certification program. And thereafter, we will, of course, open it up to all of your questions. And again, drop those questions along the way, but we will be getting to them at the end. So first, let's all get on the same page. What is TEFL? TEFL is an acronym which stands for Teaching English as a Foreign Language. And a TEFL certificate is a certificate that qualifies you to teach English in a foreign country or to students who live in a foreign country. So that means teaching abroad as well as teaching online. The slide I have on the screen here talks about other similar acronyms that are similar but different. TESL is specifically for teaching English as a second language within an English-speaking country. TESOL is sort of an umbrella term. So it can be for teaching English as a foreign language. It can be for both teaching within and outside of English-speaking countries. It's also the name of a type of study that you can do a master's in. So it is a much broader term that you'll see meaning several different things in the ESL space. But what we're talking about today specifically is TEFL or TEFL. Now, when it comes to the value of TEFL, that plus your bachelor's degree qualifies you as an ESL teacher for jobs online and abroad. You don't need to have any experience as a teacher. You don't need to have any additional teaching credentials. You just need to have a great TEFL course alongside your bachelor's degree in any subject. In a TEFL course, you're going to learn basic English language skills. You'll learn how to simplify English grammar for your students, how to plan lessons, how to manage a classroom, how to create effective learning materials, and so many more things to properly prepare you for teaching both online and abroad. So even if you're someone who is completely new to the profession of teaching, a TEFL certificate will give you the training that you need to succeed in the classroom. A couple of the most common questions: do you really need a TEFL certificate to teach? Yes. It's always a great idea, even if it is not required. The skills that you learn in a TEFL course will provide you the tools that you need to be a successful teacher. So keep that in mind. We always do recommend it. It also helps your resume to stand out to international employers, especially if you do include a practicum as well. That really goes kind of above and beyond what their expectations are and shows that you have that teaching experience on top of your training. What if you don't have a bachelor's degree? You can still teach abroad, but it is a little bit more complicated. So if that is you in this situation, be sure to ask your questions about that in the Q&A session today. Essentially, you'll find that a 4-year bachelor's degree is a minimum for teaching online and abroad. However, we do recommend considering getting your TEFL even before you've finished your bachelor's degree. It's something I myself did, and it allowed me to start looking for jobs before I even graduated. And you'll also want to make sure that if you don't have your bachelor's degree, you are looking for the best possible TEFL you can, like the Manhattan College TEFL certification program, which again includes that practicum to give you that in-person training and that in-class training. All right, so a few specifics about this that I want to get out of the way in case you have some questions about the program itself. This is a 140-hour TEFL course. So the first 120 hours of training are completed completely online and at your own pace. Once you register for the course, you're provided access to your learning materials, which you can work on however often and however frequently you'd like. That online portion typically takes about 6 weeks, 6 to 12 weeks. So this is really the perfect time if you're interested in one of the January or February practicum start dates to get this online course out of the way, get this finished, get registered so that you're ready for those practicums. And then of course, you round out your certificate with 20 hours of practical experience. We'll talk a little bit more about this shortly, but there are both in class as well as completely online practicum options. And in both cases, you do get a certificate of completion. Here's a general overview of what the curriculum looks like. So the 120-hour online course, you cover the core curriculum, the basics of TEFL. There are also specific areas that discuss culturally responsive teaching, digital literacy, and one of my favorites, the social emotional learning and classroom community building. Then in your practicum, you take all those tools and put them into practice. So you start with some classroom management and technology, and thereafter you're going to be doing observed teaching with a co-teacher. I've put up here a sample practicum schedule, which, Jeff, I'm not sure if you wanted to talk through this. I do want to note before we dive in, this is a sample, so it is of course subject to change, but just to give you an idea of what a week could look like during your practicum.
Yes, thank you, Elspeth. So this sample practicum schedule it gives an idea of what the week would look like as you get some practical experience. I just wanted to really quickly point out the value of a practicum, having taught abroad for many years and hired teachers abroad for many years. Many employers do like to see classroom teaching experience and classroom practical experience from those people they decide to hire. So the practicum has been designed with this in mind. One day is used during the practicum just to, some of it will be review of what you've learned during your TEFL certificate, but also getting a little deeper into some important areas of teaching, such as classroom management, utilizing technology in the classroom, and so forth. There are slight differences between the on-campus practicum and the online practicum due to, of course, the location. But overall, that's what the first day is really used for. And then the last 4 days or so of the practicum are used for participants to have the opportunity to teach ESL or English language learners or ENLs and get some real experience. And their teaching will be observed, both peer observed and observed by our staff. So that is really the idea behind the practicum and generally how it will run.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And I do want to reiterate exactly what you've mentioned, the value of getting practical training. Speaking from my own personal experience, being able to be in front of a classroom in a controlled setting before taking on managing my own class for the year definitely gave me confidence that I knew what I was doing, being a new teacher. So there is definitely value both professionally and I think personally as well with that confidence building. So I'm excited that you're here today to talk about it, Jeff, and I'm excited for all the attendees to learn a little bit more about it. Another important thing to note, upcoming practicum dates for the program. So January 17th to 21st. So as I mentioned, this is really the perfect time. The course, online portion of the course, especially with the upcoming holidays, can be completed in time for this practicum. So if you are interested in that, this is really your chance to finish your online course, get registered, and get planning for that January start. If you're interested in the online program, this is also a great time to get started. That begins on February 21st. And then we have dates in April, June, and August as well. I also just love this photo of the campus in the winter. So if you are planning to go in person in January, this is the kind of beautiful scenery that you'll get to appreciate. All right, so we've covered the basics. We've talked a little bit about the Practicum program, curriculum overall of the program, TEFL basics, and so now we can really get into your questions. I am already seeing a few coming through, and again, please continue to drop those into the question box. But I have a few here that are just getting bubbled up from the rest of the Teach Wait team to ask some specific questions. Okay, so I have a specific question here. Someone who is currently working as a chemistry teacher in a college and is curious if TEFL can help them shift careers and find positions in, it says Western countries, so I assume both English and non-English speaking countries. Good question. Jeff, I'm not sure if you want to talk a little bit about this or if you want me to take that one.
I think I can give my thoughts on it. I think that such certificate can be valuable, particularly if you are looking at going to study or to teach, I'm sorry, in another country. And if you already have teaching experience, obviously you have great background for making that shift. In terms of hiring, I think that hiring managers really like to see teaching experience, which is of course why the practicum exists. And so I think the certificate can be a great step forward for somebody who's looking to make that change. But I can, if you have other input, Elspeth, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I would second exactly what you've mentioned. I would also say that a lot of people who are looking to change careers, even if they are already in teaching, find that these courses are extremely valuable. You're getting such specialized training. So if you have worked, in this case, as a chemistry teacher for some time, you know how to teach that subject really well, but learning how to teach English, and more than that, learning how to manage a group of students where you're teaching them in English and English is their second language, or in some cases a totally foreign language to them, there are benefits to both preparing for that kind of environment through a TEFL and then putting it into practice before you dive into your job search, so that you really know what you're getting yourself into and that you feel confident and prepared about the challenges that lay forward, because they are different from subject to subject.
Absolutely, that's a very good point. I would like to add that although I'm not sure if you're a native speaker, the person who asked this question, but knowing your language and teaching your language are very different things. So although as a teacher, you would know how to, at least for example, create lesson plans and of course do your due diligence there, actually learning ways to impart the knowledge of the language itself can be a big step for people. So that's another area where we're going through such a program would be very valuable for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good point. Another really interesting question here, that somebody already has their TEFL certificate and they're curious how to get started with looking for a job if they're already eligible. They've mentioned they have experience in teaching, but they're still in their final year of their undergrad. So that one's a bit tricky. I'll speak from personal experience first, saying that having tutoring experience working with younger students, certainly not the same as having practical experience in ESL teaching. So it's great to have that other experience under your belt, but I think international schools will value having practical experience in ESL teaching. They do make that distinction. In terms of if somebody already has their TEFL certificate, Jeff, how might they get started with the Practicum with Manhattan College?
Yes, so you can learn more about signing up for the Practicum itself, either through TeachWay or you can contact us directly, and we can help you to register if you only need the Practicum. But I would also add to what Elspeth said that getting that additional experience in addition to your education can be very attractive for hiring managers in other countries, in other schools.
Mm-hmm. There's so many different ways of really looking for a job, but I think the biggest piece of advice that it sounds like, Jeff, you and I are on the same page, is like getting practical training can really help your resume to stand out. And not just that training, because again, you mentioned you have some teaching experience, but really ESL teaching training in that specific environment, because it is very different. And again, speaking from my own personal experience, I tutored many other subjects, but I've never been in an ESL classroom until I did a practical training. And it's very different when you're managing that kind of environment. So it's good to have the experience. All right, I have a bunch of questions here as well. How many teachers attend the practicum? Is it one-to-one training?
It will depend on how many people enroll for each practicum. However, we will have staffing to ensure that every teacher gets as much observation time as possible with our staff. And there will be feedback sessions, both with our staff and peer feedback. I think it's very valuable to observe other people teaching. It can really inform your own teaching. So that's definitely part of the program. And yeah, so in terms of one-on-one, there'll be feedback from the observation staff and also from your peers.
Great. Yeah, I think both are really valuable. And there is also, I've heard you mention before, Jeff, there's a really fun energy when you get this group for a week together. So that's kind of part of it, is you end up in this cohort for whenever your practicum is.
I think it's a really great opportunity to learn from each other, and you're sort of all, you know, starting from similar places, and can be great context on the road too. You never know who you're going to bump into in another country or something like that. So yeah, there's more value than just the theory and the practice.
I know in my own experience, the friends that I made just in that 1 week of practical training, I was in touch with throughout my teaching overseas, and still to this day keep in touch. Not necessarily, you know, teaching abroad, but it's such a good opportunity to just, yeah, make connections with other people that are sharing similar interests as you. I've got another question here. Someone is saying, I'm from Argentina. Can I complete this program online?
Absolutely, and and I would add that in my experience, I taught abroad for over a decade, and now of course I work in the similar field here in higher education in the U.S. Many of the best teachers I've ever worked with are non-native speakers. So if there are any non-native speakers out there, absolutely go for it. And yes, the only real factor is the time, time zones, because of course the classes are scheduled for our local time zone, which is New York. So that would be the biggest, perhaps barrier or challenge, maybe. If you're in a really distinct time zone, I think Argentina's not so distinct, so it's probably not so hard, but that's something to consider when looking at the online practicum, what your time zone is and your availability is.
Yeah, really good question. And again, just to reiterate, you can do it completely online. This new completely online practicum that's beginning in February is a really great opportunity to get the expertise of ESL experts like Jeff at Manhattan College, even if you can't get to the campus. So really exciting opportunity. Sounds like for this particular student. Okay, there are a lot of questions here. I'm just trying to look for some great ones. Someone is asking, they notice that it is a no credit program, and I believe that it is because this is a not-for-credit professional certificate, correct? Yeah, okay, so that's a good question.
It's a non-credit. I mean, you excuse me, participants will not receive credits from Manhattan College. You will receive a certificate at the end from our college, which shows that you have gone through the practicum program and the number of hours of the practicum. So that's basically what the certificate says. But in terms of college credit, no, there's no credit involved.
Very important distinction. It is like a certificate that trains you for a job. So you do get the value from that. I think there's a simple question here I might just clarify about completing TEFL online. So I've gotten this before in other webinars. You can complete a TEFL online. The delivery method of your course does not impact the validity of your certificate. So simply put, whether you complete your training online or whether you opt for the online practicum or the in-person practicum, it doesn't affect whether or not you're TEFL certified. I think the important thing is to consider what environment you would learn best in. Would you prefer an in-person practicum, the chance to visit the campus as well, seeing the students face-to-face, or online? And that might even be impacted by what your teaching goals are. If you're planning to teach abroad, that in-person experience may be more similar to what you're going to be doing overseas. Good questions, a lot of questions. So let me just keep reading through here, and please keep dropping your questions in the chat box or question box. Somebody's asking here, do you receive a certificate after the practicum? I know you mentioned this, Jeff, but if you wanted to clarify a bit for this person.
Yes, so receive a certificate at the end of the practicum.
And with this program, what's great about it is you'll get 2 certificates. So a certificate specifically for your practicum on top of your 120-hour online certificate, which I think makes a big impact when you submit that to an employer for your application. Your practicum is not a footnote. It is its own certificate, which is really great.
Right. Yeah. And also, I'll reiterate, the certificate does state how many hours the practicum is, which is important very often with hiring managers. They like to see a number of practical hours. So it is stated clearly on the certificate and does come from Manhattan College.
Another good question here. I have taught business classes and received an advanced TEFL. Will your program augment or duplicate what I have already done? A bit of a unique situation, this one. And I think that maybe there's a distinction to be made here in when we're talking about the TEFL practicum versus TEFL certification. So I'm not sure if you want to kind of explain, maybe it sounds like the student is wondering what they'll get on top of their TEFL certificate with this practicum in their training.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's a little bit difficult to know if it will duplicate things you've done. I'm not sure which program you went through, if you're talking about Teachaway or another one, but as we mentioned, the value of the practicum is to get that classroom experience and to show that you can lead lessons and lead classes while teaching to an ESL or an ENL audience. So it should augment it if you don't have, if your certificate did not have a practical element to it. This is where the practicum would really augment that. But in terms of how your certificate, what it would duplicate in terms of the theory, I can't say. But that's where the value for the practicum, at least, would definitely come into play, particularly if your certificate did not have a practicum element. And I know there are many certificates out there that do not have a practical element. And this is where the value comes from this program, is that you get observed teaching experience and with students, and you actually give lessons to English language learners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. There are so many different types of TEFL courses out there as well. And it's really tough to say without knowing the specific program, as you already mentioned, Jeff, which ones are valuable, if the curriculum is going to be the same quality of curriculum that this Manhattan College TEFL program offers. But certainly if you're satisfied with your TEFL certification, you can, and we'll have contact information provided afterwards, inquire about just enrolling in the practicum and getting that practical experience. If you're new to English teaching, then that in and of itself is going to be a new challenge for you, and getting practice doing that before you go start a job is always a great idea. Another short question here, somebody is asking if there are scholarships. At the moment, there are not, but there is currently an offer that we'll reveal at the end of the Q&A session for anybody who's attended today, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Another good question. Somebody is asking if they would be considered a student at Manhattan College for registering in this course.
We do not register non-credit students as students at Manhattan College. So this would, so the short answer is no, you would not be registered as a Manhattan College student.
Really good question. Let's see here. Somebody here is asking about enrolling in a master's program, I assume in TEFL with Manhattan College.
We do have an education department at the college, one of the schools, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this. I don't actually know if we have a master's in teaching. I don't think we do have a master's in teaching English second language, but I would have to look. I think we have a certification for that, mainly for people who are licensed teachers who would like to get an ESL. I think we have that, but in terms of like an MAT-SOL or MAT-TEFL, I don't believe we have that at the college. I should check on that.
That's a tough question. I'm also curious.
We're not connected with the School of Education. We're a separate department. We're specific for training teachers and training students in English as a foreign language and English second language. So we're not actually part of the School of Education.
That's an important distinction. Really, the benefit of this program is you're getting specialized training. I mean, you've heard already that Jeff himself has taught abroad for years before working at Manhattan College in this program. So that's really the unique benefit. It's really specialized training. And I'd also just, for this person, if you want to maybe add some more details in the chat or question box, maybe what your goals are with the master's program. I'm not sure if you would need that for what you're hoping to do. If you're just hoping to teach English online or overseas, then a TEFL with a practicum would provide you with enough training. You may not need to go so far as to investigate the master's program. Another question.
If I can add something else, Beth, I think it really depends what your ultimate goals are. If I can just give a little bit of background about myself, I had a certificate when I worked abroad, and that made me decide to get a master's and ultimately a doctorate because I really found that I loved this field. So the certificate was a great stepping stone for at least my career path. I'm not saying everybody would have the same career path or whatever, but it really did serve a lot to learn that I really love this field. So that's something to consider, especially if you're new to the field, to think about, oh, maybe this is a good step towards ultimately maybe an MAT-SOL or whatever you'd like to do.
That's a great story. I didn't know that, Jeff. That's exciting. And I can say too, I mean, I would not be here working at Teachaway, working on these TEFL programs if I hadn't gone and taught abroad and realized how incredible the experience was. And, you know, I could not recommend it enough to anyone. It really is a great experience. Another good question here. How would I have to travel to Manhattan College to complete the practicum? another tricky question here because they don't say where they're from or how they're planning to travel. But maybe if we could give them some information on when they're expected to arrive and some of the details about that.
Sure. So the practicum is set up for to start on a Monday or maybe a Tuesday. I have to look at the calendar. But I think anyway, before we would expect people to just be there by the first day of the practicum if you're coming on campus. Whether that means you have to travel and arrive the night before, the day before, or what have you. I guess depends where you're located. There are no travel. Unfortunately, I don't arrange travel for people. I can certainly try to give ideas about sort of the easiest way to get around New York once you get here. But it really depends. Yeah, without a lot of detail on where you're from or that kind of thing. Basically, if you show up by the day, we'll send out a schedule, and if you show up by that time, you can come whenever you'd like. I would mention, and I've gotten emails on this before, so I'll just mention it here. We do not support F1 study visas for this program. So that's just something to bear in mind if you're not from the US, if you're not a US resident or a US citizen. You would come in on just on a B1, B2 visa or your own, whichever visa you apply for. So that's something to bear in mind.
Really good question, and one that I haven't read it yet, but very likely it would have been asked today. I have somebody asking what the cost covers for the course, so sort of related to the travel that we mentioned.
Yeah, the costs cover the practicum program. So the full day of training and all the feedback, all the prep, and all the class time with the students and observations and everything. That's what it covers.
Yeah, great clarification there. It does not include your flights if you do need them, your travel, your accommodation. But I think it's also been a great motivator for many people to make the trip to campus, to New York. So something to keep in mind as well.
Yes, and I'll just since you brought up Elspeth, we are located in New York City, just about a 40-minute subway ride from Midtown Manhattan. So we're well located. So if you if visiting New York City has ever been something you'd like to do, this is a great way to sort of package the trip. You could do your professional development and get to know the city. We're a very good location to go down to the city afterwards or before.
Yeah, and with that proposed schedule, there is definitely some time to explore, which is great. Another question I'm getting asked here, somebody is wondering if they need to complete the online training before completing the practicum, or registering rather in the practicum.
It's strongly recommended that a person has the certificate before they come to the practicum for a number of reasons. First, the theoretical knowledge you receive from the online certificate will serve you very well in a practicum, because that's not really the goal of the practicum. We're not going to spend a lot of time going over how to teach the present perfect. That's something, like that sort of thing. It's more of a hands-on, get in the classroom. Yes, we do have a day of training, but that's a lot of it's classroom management and the tools utilized to teach. I don't know. I'm sorry, Elspeth. I don't know if there's a rule about that, but it's strongly recommended that you come with a certificate, preferably a Teachway certificate in hand before coming to the practicum.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think that you've definitely made it very clear. Certainly, the Manhattan College online TEFL certification program is designed to go hand in hand with the practicum and give you those tools. And having those tools before you show up is always a good idea. certainly if you have registered and completed most of the training before you go, that is something that I think would still prepare you enough for the practicum. So if you're really keen to get started in January and you have some big holiday plans where you may not be able to finish the course, don't let that discourage you. It's definitely something that I would say. A question here, how long is the practicum?
It's 1 week, basically 5 days.
And another question here, are there any other materials that you need for the practicum, i.e. textbooks?
All materials will be supplied by us, so you do not have to have any materials with you or order anything. I guess a pencil would be good, but we can even hook you up with a pencil. But yeah, so really, you don't really need to bring anything to the practicum apart from maybe things you keep notes on, laptop, that kind of thing. But all teaching materials will be supplied by us.
Good question there as well. Somebody here is asking, is the 20-hour practicum a requirement for getting the Manhattan College TEFL certification? Which, before I pass it to you, Jeff, I'll say no. However, as we've mentioned, and as I'll let Jeff speak to, there is a value to it, which is why we strongly recommend completing them together.
Yeah, I think if you take some time to look at the types of jobs, well, it depends on maybe the job you're looking for. But if you're looking for example, a language school in another country, very often you'll see in the job description that they would like you to have a certificate with a practical training, usually a minimum of 120 hours, sometimes more, with practical training. They want that. The reason being, of course, from their perspective, and as I said, I hired when I was abroad as well. It just gives you an idea that this person knows how to conduct a class, how to manage a classroom, more than probably more than someone who just has a theoretical background. So this is really the value of doing both in one go.
Yeah, and on that same note, the types of jobs that you'd qualify for, the caliber of jobs, the way your application might stand out to an employer overseas is greatly improved if you have the practical training. On top of that, in today's climate, we are already seeing a huge spike in interest for teaching jobs online and overseas. And so having that edge against other applicants is going to be extremely important to teaching overseas in the future.
And I would add to that if you perhaps would like to teach online, people who are hiring for online programs really like to see that you know your way around learning management systems and you're able to use an online environment to teach effectively and have some experience there. So it doesn't, either one, if you want to go teach abroad or if you want to embark on an online teaching career, then either, both practicums can be very valuable for you in that sense, and for hiring managers to take a look at you.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Another question here is, what ages and levels can you teach with the TEFL certificate? And I guess on that same note, what ages and levels of students do you teach during the practicum?
No, it's a very good question. The practicum is really with adult learners. We do not have a young learners practicum at the moment. And so the people you would be teaching would be adults, sort of 18 plus.
Yeah, good question. I would say as well that in terms of opportunities overseas at language schools, you know, in my experience, many of those are adults as well. I'm not sure if you had the same thing when you were overseas, Jeff, but certainly I noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really both, and the vast majority are adult driven. It maybe depends on the country and that sort of thing. It can vary quite a bit by region, by country. However, I could tell you that I did my certificate, and I ended up teaching every age under the sun because of need. So yes, I mean, I'm not discounting a young learner certificate at all. It's valuable, absolutely, but the skills that you would learn, generally the skills you would learn in this practicum would be valuable no matter the age. I mean, the techniques and the skills that you are going to practice are going to be valuable no matter who you teach. But yeah, it is designed for adult learners.
Great question. Somebody else here is asking if you have any other suggestions on how to prepare for the practicum outside of the course. For example, podcasts, books.
I think the number one thing you can do to prepare really is to take the TEFL certificate to get the theoretical base for practicing it in the classroom. A lot of teaching, in my opinion, this is purely my opinion, is really confidence driven. And a person who's confident in the classroom is very often, or maybe even usually, someone who knows what they're doing and or knows what they're teaching. I could give you a really embarrassing story about myself. I don't want to take up a lot of time. When I started teaching, I had no idea what I was doing. I'll be very honest about that. It was awful. And part of that, I did not have the experience that I should have had, getting into a classroom. So of course, that's just me. Maybe you'd have a very different experience, but that's so really preparing is getting that basis. I think getting that basis going and feeling confident. So when you get here, we'll talk. Part of that training day is going over classroom management and sort of the tools you'll be using and those sorts of things, which will all hopefully equip you better to feel more confident when you get into the classroom. But in terms of before you get here, not really, apart from the TEFL certificate as far as I can tell.
That's great. I could share my own anecdote about completing a practicum that was not as thorough. So this is, unfortunately, I'm aging myself, but before this course existed by about a decade. And this practicum I took did not have the observed teaching, did not have the feedback sessions, did not begin with that day of learning about classroom management and using the tools. It was really just about observing someone teaching and practicing a bit of teaching with no real feedback. And although it did give me confidence when I began teaching, certainly more than some of my counterparts who had never been in the classroom before, I will say that having this type of a practicum experience specifically, so this specific practicum for Manhattan College is going to give you far and away what you will see other practicums offer. You're going to get that training that you need to succeed. So everything is going to be kind of handled for you when you're there, which is why it's such a great program. All right, I have another question here. I think that we will do 2 more quick questions, and I appreciate everyone submitting them today. We've had a very engaged group before we round out today, and we'll leave you with some information of how you can get a hold of us with more questions, maybe more specific questions that you weren't comfortable sharing in the webinar. We're happy to answer questions about your specific case. Somebody is asking here if there is a community page where they can connect with other Practicum alumni.
Wow, that's a really good idea. I'm going to steal that. We don't. We should. But now that you've mentioned it, it's something we really should come up with we should start. We'll start one. I promise you at some point. I hadn't even thought about it. That's embarrassing to say, but it's true. Good idea.
We're getting some great questions, good ideas here as well. A lot of positive feedback. Okay, the last question here is a bit of a tricky one. Someone is asking, I'll squeeze in two. One I'll answer quickly here. Is there a list of jobs that you can be offered once you get the certificate? So no, you do have to go through your own application process. You're welcome to check out the Teach-Away job board. But you know, just like with getting your bachelor's degree, there isn't a list of jobs that you are automatically going to be able, you're not going to be offered jobs upon finishing. I think the really unique thing about a TEFL certificate versus standard degree program is that there's a huge demand for ESL teachers, and you're getting, again, practical training. So you're not just coming away with the theory, you're coming away with practical training to make you a good candidate for jobs and to make you successful right away. The last question here for you, Jeff, today is someone's asking who the instructors are of the practical training.
Good question. I'm one of the instructors, and my colleagues, my other ESL, experienced ESL instructors will also be a part of the program. Just a background about myself, I taught abroad for over a decade, and now I run the ESL and intensive English programs here at Manhattan College. And all of our instructors have MAT SOLs or teaching experience of many years, sometimes decades. And so it'll be staff of mine who will be part of this program.
Great, good question as well. Well, thank you everyone for sticking it out for the Q&A session. Really thoughtful questions and much appreciated. We'll round out today just with our promo code here. So for any of you who did attend, we are extending a 20% off offer for the Manhattan College TEFL certification program. So that's your online training as well as your practical training. You can select the cohort of your choosing. So again, the one that's coming up the most recent is January, and then we do have the online one in February. So keep those in your calendar. You can head to our website, which I've listed here on the screen if you want to grab that, and use code TEFL101 at checkout to save that 20%. And for any of you that have other questions, again, you can visit the same website to redeem your coupon to learn a little bit more about the course curriculum in detail, or you can email myself and the other course advisors at TEFL@teachaway.com. With any specific questions about the Practicum or Manhattan College, please be sure to contact Jeff, and I've included his email here as well. We will also be sending everyone today a recording of today's webinar so that you'll have a chance to review this information and review some of the answers that Jeff has been so kind as to provide us with today. Jeff, thank you again for attending today's Q&A session, for sharing your experience and your knowledge with us and all the attendees today. And
thank you,
we really look forward to, thank you. Yes, we look forward to having some students joining the Practicum in the near future.
Absolutely, and please feel free to utilize the email address provided and ask me any questions directly if I didn't get a chance to address your question here. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. So, and I can also schedule a video call with you if you would like. I have a Calendly, so let me know if